Okay, everyone, welcome back. Hey, we made it through the storm, right? It's coming down there pretty good for a while. Okay, let me get you caught up on everything that's going on. So tonight we are doing intelligence. Okay, next week we're going to be doing social psychology and developmental psychology. Your test is going to be an on your own. In other words, you're not going to be on Zoom. So at the end of class next week, I'm going to send you the exam. It would be due back by class on Tuesday. So you're on the honor system. You're going to take the test and send it back. You can do it whenever you feel comfortable between the end of next week's class and the following week's class, or the next week's class. Your topics are due today. If you did not send your topic yet, I can give you until Friday to pick your topic, okay? Your paper is due in 2 weeks. So you don't want to wait too much longer than Friday to pick a topic, or you won't have enough time to get your research done for your paper. Okay? But the third test is off of Zoom. You won't take it during class time, okay? This lecture is not going to take the whole time. I scheduled it this way so you would have some time to do a little research for your paper if you got done early, to get the activities caught up. So we only have one lecture tonight. But next week we will have 2 lectures. So it will be on the social psychology and on the human growth and development. So this lecture and then the 2 next week are going to be part of that take-home test. Again, no books, no notes. You're on the honor system to do it. It's going to be multiple choice, just like all the other ones were. You'll have an answer sheet, and all you have to do is send me the answer sheet back. So you'll have almost a whole week. Pick a time after you've studied to take the test and send it to me. That will give you some wiggle room for getting your paper done and getting your assignments caught up, because again, we're halfway through the course as of today. I know it moves really quick when we have a 6-week course that's doing 16 weeks worth of material. So let's get started. Once I'm done with the intelligence, you may want to do the multiple intelligence test. There's time built in today's class. It's not going to go to 10 o'clock. So you'll have plenty of time if you want to pop on Blackboard and do that multiple intelligence test. It's self-scored. So it's to help you become a better learner, okay? So when we get to the section on multiple intelligence in this PowerPoint, then you'll take the test. It will make a lot more sense to you, okay? So just hang in there.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is that the survey I saw in there? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yep.
And then that's due by the end of class. We'll just do that and then turn
That's
it
what
in.
you're gonna do as part of class, and it would be part of your activity journal.
Okay, and do we just email it? Oh, so we hold
It's
on to
just,
it for
yeah,
you.
you put
Gotcha.
it right. Just put your final results right in the activity journal. So you'll tell me what your scores were. That's all you have to do, is tell me your scores.
Okay,
But
thank you.
as we do tonight's lecture, I'm going to tell you what those scores will mean. So when you actually take the test, you'll understand your own scores. Okay, because it's self-graded. But I don't necessarily have to know that you have high, intelligence and naturalistic intelligence. It will help you to know that you have high intelligence and naturalistic intelligence. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's get started. So when we talk about imagery and we talk about representations of perception, we've talked about how we store information. That's what you just tested on learning and memory. There are different ways that our brain processes information. When we talk about visual memory, it's really easy to think of how many windows there are in a home, right? You just have to picture your home or apartment, and you can literally count in your mind how many windows, because you have stored that information in a visual image in your long-term memory. But in reality, when we talk about mental images, they actually are all five senses. So not only visual, but right now, if I told you in your mind, hear your favorite song, you could pull up that sound in your mind. You wouldn't have to turn on the radio. You could hear it in your mind. Same with gustatory, your favorite food. Imagine the taste of your favorite food, whether it's steak or salad or, chocolate chip cookies, whatever it is. If you thought about it, you could actually taste that substance. Olfactory, smell. Think of maybe the most disgusting smell you've ever experienced, maybe it's old fish or maybe it's mold or whatever, but you could remember that and actually feel like you smell that. And then tactile, touch, you know, what does sandpaper feel like? If you've ever experienced sandpaper ever in your life, you can remember that feeling. So when we talk about these mental images, they aren't only visual, they're all of our senses. Some of these are pretty straightforward, like visual imagery. When you think of that mental space, if I ask you to picture your room, you can picture that spatial area of like your room. There's a size to your room. So there's a difference maybe from your bedroom to your bathroom to your living room. The grain would be the texture of your room. So what are your walls made out of? What do you have on the floor? Is it carpeting? Is it wood? Is it towel? Etc. These are different types of visual images. But in our mind, we can also manipulate objects. And I'm going to stop the share for a second so you can actually see me. I'm going to use one that is part of what we call an intelligence test that would be given by a psychologist. If you remember way back, we talked about different types of ways we tell how we learn, okay? So here I have a piece of paper. Everyone see a piece of paper here? 8.5 by 11. I'm using this as a prop, but in reality, if a psychologist was giving you an IQ test, you would have to do this in your mind with no prop. So the psychologist would say, fold the paper in half, and you would have to fold it in half in your mind. And then he or she may say, fold it again. And you would have to do that in your mind. And then they say, fold it one more time. And once again. Now, this would all be with no props in your mind. And if you're a college student, doesn't matter if this is your first class or if this is hundreds of classes you've had, all of you can do this. Okay? Now the psychologist would say, imagine taking a hole punch and poking 2 holes right up here in this upper corner. How many holes would there be in this piece of paper if you unfolded it? Except you would have to unfold it in your mind. And as I said, if you're a college student, I know every one of you can do this. But what the psychologist is looking for, not that you can do it because we know you can do it, but how fast you can do it. In other words, how fast do you process information? And that's part of intelligence, how fast you process information. Some of you could come up, and you don't have to know the answer. It's not a quiz question or anything. Some of you can do it in seconds. You may already know the answer. Other people may take a week to figure it out. That's what the psychologist is looking for. How fast you can process information. That is part of intelligence. When you take a paper and pencil IQ test, it's a time test, but there's enough time that most people can complete the entire IQ test. Okay, so let me go back to the share here. And of course, my dog was quiet that whole time you were taking the test, and now he decides to bark. Okay, so when we talk about concepts are a broad category. So for an example, like fruit, that's a category. A prototype is a representation of that category. And one of the most common one of the most typical answers somebody would give you if you asked them to name a fruit would be apple. Okay. It could also be orange. It could also be banana. And if you're from a different location that has different fruit, maybe the part of the world you're from, pineapples are the most common fruit there. You would say pineapple. So what you decide as a prototype will make a difference on what your answer would be. I'm going to close the door for just 1 minute so the dog doesn't bother us. Sorry about that. Like I said, perfectly quiet the whole time you're taking a test. So something would be typical would be apple, but an avocado is a fruit too, but not too many people are going to come up with avocado as their first answer. How about this? Well, it's a bird, right? A cardinal. So it represents that category of birds. How about this next one? Okay, we could have this representing a dog. We could also have it representing a pet, or even a larger category, it could just represent an animal. And then, of course, bananas would be fruit. This is the very basic level of how things are encoded and stored in our memory so we can use it. Now, I'm giving you an example here, and then I'm going to give you one that's going to be the extra credit on the test. And you can choose to do the extra credit when you get the test next week, or you can choose not to do it again because it's extra credit. So, but since I gave you the slides, I can't make this the extra credit. So let's say it was a storm like we just had, and everyone's light went out, and it was the day before our test, and you hadn't studied. Could you make a lantern that you could use to study, just having a candle, a box of tacks, and some matches? Well, yeah, you could, mount the tacks box on the wall with your tacks, and then light the candle and drip a little bit of wax on the top of the box and place your candle. And there you have a lantern for you to study. You had to think outside the box. And problem solving is very, very important when we look at a person's intelligence. See, in today's day and age, most of us have smart technology, right? You're using it right now. So you can Google almost anything, right? I mean, if you really need to know what Pythagorean theorem is, you can just type in Pythagorean theorem and it gives you a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? But it doesn't necessarily tell you how to solve a word problem that you might need Pythagorean theorem for, because you would have to figure out what A is, what B is, and then solve for C. Problem solving is important. How fast you problem solve is part of that processing information that we look for when we talk about intelligence. So when we talk about problem solving, we have to get beyond what's called functional fixedness. And functional fixedness gets people every time. I want you to think of things that you may have used in a way that they were never meant to be used. Example, did you ever need a hammer and not have a hammer? Think of all the things you could use as a hammer: a shoe, a cane, a bottle, right? I mean, there are other things that can be used. If you have no hammer and you need something to hammer something, you can find alternatives. If you're able to do that, you're able to get beyond functional fixedness. If any of you have ever watched the TV show MacGyver, whether it's the old one or the new one, or maybe you were fond of the SNL MacGruber, you would make fun of this guy could make anything work pretty much with duct tape and something else. He was able to get beyond just the common use of anything. Another example, when I had to do some rehab, my therapist had said, "Oh, you need a set of weights." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have any weights." They're like, "Well, you have a cane, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." "You have plastic bags, right?" "Yeah." "You have cans of vegetables, right?" "Yeah." "Well, you tie 2 bags, one on either end of your cane, and you fill them up with canned goods, and you now have a barbell." Never thought of it that way. That's not the way, the cane was designed to be used. But did it work? Did it function? Yes. So I was able to get beyond what we call functional fixedness. So if you can think of something that you've ever used in a different way, anybody want to share? Something you've ever used in a different way than it was originally meant to be used. Yes, Krista. Do you have one?
So, if everybody can anybody hear me? Everybody can hear
Yes.
me? Okay, so to snake my drain, I use a wire hanger.
Good. Yep. Yeah, works perfectly, doesn't it? Heck of a lot
Yes,
cheaper
it does.
than a steak. Anybody else?
Honestly.
I can't believe Oh, if you have never used something outside of the way it was meant to be used.
I have one.
Okay,
Oops.
I have used a credit card to break into my own apartment.
yep, good. Kind of scary that it does, though, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
good. Anybody else?
I used instead of a spoon, because I forgot a spoon for like a yogurt container, just like the tin foil folded up as a spoon.
Excellent. Yep. Anybody else?
I have used one.
Okay.
Right now, since it's the end of the year, we're packing our classroom because we got granted a makeover for the building, so everything has to be packed and stacked. So I made everything in the back of my classroom one wall higher. So it's sectioned off to the centers like art, science, whatever. So I made it look like steps from the start of the room to the back of the room.
Awesome. Great.
It was a
Anybody?
lot, 213 boxes
Oh my God, 213 bonds. Oh
in
my-
1 week.
Anybody else?
I've had to use a pocket knife as a screwdriver more times than I'd like to admit, because the knife didn't. The knife has suffered.
Anybody else want to add one or two more?
I use a knife as a can opener.
Good. Anybody else? Okay, so
Scissor,
go ahead.
scissors for wire cutters.
Scissors for wire cutters. I needed pliers one time, and I didn't have any pliers, and the only thing I had was salad tongs, and I used salad tongs to get a nut.
I got a great one.
Go ahead.
I used my wife's thingy that she uses to tenderize meat
Okay.
as a hammer because she wanted me to hang pictures in my house. So I was too lazy to go downstairs in the shed, whatever, to get my tools, and I just used it and it worked.
So if you were able ever to use something in another way than it was meant to be used, you did problem solving. You got beyond what we call functional fixedness. Okay, so let me go back to my share here. Nice job thank you everyone for sharing. Now, when we do problem solving, like real world problem solving, it's much easier to solve a problem if it's well defined. In other words, if all the information is there. And as much as you may have hated it in high school when your algebra teacher or your geometry teacher gave you a train is going 45 miles an hour southwest, another train is coming southeast at 62 miles an hour, where are they going to meet? Well, there's enough information there for you to solve the problem. That's considered a well-defined problem. Sometimes we're not given enough information, so it makes it difficult to solve the problem. An example, imagine you're at CCAC on campus and there's an empty bus that pulls up to the bus stop and 8 students get on. And it goes another 2 blocks, and 5 more students get on and 2 get off. And then it goes another couple blocks and 6 people get on and 1 person gets off. And it goes a couple more blocks and 4 people get on, but 5 people get off. What color is the bus driver's shirt? See, the information isn't there to solve the problem. Now, anybody who has in their experience riding Port Authority buses could take a good educated guess because typically their shirts are either white, beige, or blue. But if you haven't been on a bus in years, You were probably in your mind counting how many stops or how many people were getting on and how many were getting off, thinking that's what the problem was going to ask you. That's considered an ill-defined problem. The chances of you getting that correct are very slim because you don't have enough information to solve it. So sometimes you have to take a guess. Now, remember we said every time you see two definitions on a slide, you know somewhere on a test, you're going to have to know the difference between the two. So the first one that we use as a type of strategy is called an algorithm. An algorithm is a guaranteed set of steps for you to get the correct answer. So let's use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. As long as you have any two of those variables, you will get the correct answer. That's an algorithm. Okay. If your cat is running around your house and you can't find your cat, you could use an algorithm of checking each room, and after you have eliminated the cat from being in that room, close the door so the cat can't go in there. Eventually, you're going to find the cat because you'll eliminate one room at a time. That's an algorithm. You will find the solution to where your cat is. A heuristic is a general rule of thumb. It's kind of an educated guess. It's a shortcut to finding a solution, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the correct solution. So an example of a heuristic, one time I'm not big on knowing everything you're supposed to know about cars, and this is before cell phones. My car started to make this really loud beeping noise, and it was night. I was by myself taking a friend home clear across the other side of like Pittsburgh. They were in North Huntington. I'm from the South Hills, on a dirt road, no street lights. And I looked down and my engine temperature is on high and the car is literally screaming at me, beeping. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I know nothing about this car. So I shut it off and I'm like, well, when there's something wrong, I see people open the hood. So I opened the hood and I knew enough not to touch the radiator. At least that much I knew. But I'm looking with this little dinky flashlight going, I don't even know what I'm looking for. I have no clue. So I closed the lid and I kept thinking, well, there are no cars anywhere on this road. And to walk back to my friend's house would be about 40 minutes in the dark with this little teeny flashlight. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to just have to sit here and wait till it gets light and then try to find help. Well, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, an idea. Remember, we talked about that light bulb idea. Just came to me. Hey, in the winter, the heat that comes into your car is being pulled off your engine. What if I turned my heater on high? Could I cool my engine down enough that I could at least get to a main road? And that's what I did. And it got me to a main road and got me another 45 minutes home without ever moving from the center of the temperature. And when I told my mechanic what I did, he's like, wow, that's something I would have told you to try, but you got very lucky because you could have also like blew up your engine. I'm like, oh, great. That's a heuristic. It wasn't a guarantee that it was going to work, but it did. An algorithm will always work. A heuristic may or may not work. Now, when people think, we ask, are people logical? Well, most people follow two things. They follow either deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning. Most people start with deductive reasoning, where you start with like the big picture, and then you start to look at individual examples, and then you come up with a specific answer. Inductive is the exact opposite. You start with the little examples, notice what's in common, and then you make the big picture. You should just be familiar with these two types of reasoning. So on a test, I may have a scenario and ask you, is this deductive or inductive reasoning? Now, I put this on the slide. You can cross this off. I put that there because there's a section in your textbook on affirming the consequent, and you are not responsible for that in Intro to Psychology. That's more a statistical analysis. That would be a higher level of psych. So don't study that because you won't need it. So if you want to make yourself a notation, you don't have to read that section in the book. Now, this one usually gets me in trouble. It's not mine though, so don't throw, rotten fruit my way. This actually came from a friend of mine who's a professor at Pitt in the ethics department. Linda is a 31-year-old, single, outspoken, very bright woman who majored in philosophy and participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Linda is most likely a bank teller, an insurance salesperson, or a bank teller active in the feminist movement. So just raise your hand just this way. How many people think that Linda is just a bank teller? I'll switch back and forth. Doesn't look like we have. Nobody thinks Linda. Oh, we got one who thinks she's a bank teller. Okay. How many people think that Linda is an insurance salesperson? Just raise your hand if you think Linda is an insurance. Okay, so we got a couple there. We got a couple there. Okay, good. So we got about 6. So that means everyone else thinks that Linda is a bank teller who's active, in the feminist movement. Well, guess what?
Oh,
It's not 3. You can't make that jump that just because she's 31 and single and participated in other types of demonstrations, that she is also active in the feminist movement. You can't make that jump. So if you used a general heuristic just by what they gave you, it gave you an incorrect answer. So 3 is not correct. 2 is also not correct because in reality, statistic-wise, more insurance salespeople are male than female. Your answer is actually 1. So my one person that guessed that Linda's a bank teller, congratulations. You're only about the 7th person in all the years I've been using this to get it right. This is what we call a problem-solving dilemma. You have to take the information they gave you to try to get clues, but you can't take it too far. You can't overgeneralize. Now, this is also a test-taking strategy that I'm going to give you a hint for if you ever take multiple choice tests. A good 70% of the time, if 2 answers are very, very similar, one of the two answers is going to be the correct answer. And if we could rule this out, because we can't make that assumption, your answer would have to be that she's a bank teller. So again, don't throw rotten fruit or, vegetables at your computer screen. I didn't make the story, but you can see how a heuristic of trying to get information that we've been given doesn't always give us the correct answer.
Ma'am,
Yes,
what is choice number one? She can be anything else.
yeah, but
I can say she is none of these three.
but they're your three choices, so you had to choose one of those three.
Mhm.
So if you eliminated 3 and you eliminated 2, the only one left is 1. That's the only options that they gave us.
Okay.
Good point. But when they only give you, these are your 3 possible answers, and you can eliminate 2, it's the same thing anytime you take a multiple choice test. If you can eliminate 2, even if you don't know the correct answer, if you can get it down to 2, you got a 50-50 chance of getting it right, even though you may have never studied that particular question. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, this is another one. Think about this. In the English language, so are there more words that begin with the letter K, or are there more words that have K as the third position? In reality, there are more words that have K in the third position. But see, it's easy to remember words that start with a K, kind, kite. It's a lot harder to, okay, I got to think 3 letters in, make and bake, okay, to think of 3 letters in. It's more familiar to us. So a lot of times people will guess K at the beginning of the word more than the third position. Or this one, which is more common, dying from a car accident or a plane crash. Well, actually a car accident. There's a car accident every 15 seconds. There aren't a lot of plane crashes, but we remember those, right? Because they make the news, big stories. The only way a car accident makes the news is 1, if it caused a problem during rush hour, if it did damage to something like a home, or somebody may have died because of that car accident. But every plane crash is going to make the news, but not every car accident will. So more people are afraid of flying than they are driving, because they have this understanding, oh, plane, if it's bad, it could fall, people will die. Yes, but people can die in a car accident just as easily and more frequently. This one always gets me in trouble when I ask people to think about this one. Who does more chores in your house, you or the person you live with? You may not want to tell the person you live with your answer. So things that are available, things we use, the things that we've had connection with are more easily and commonly able to be used and to be judged than stuff that we're not familiar with. Okay. Now, we finally got through that introduction to get to our main topic for tonight, which is intelligence. So, are there different types of intelligence? Well, I've kind of already hinted to it that there are, since I gave you a multiple intelligence test on Blackboard. Yes, there are different types of intelligence. And if there are, how many? Well, let's start with what about intelligence? What is it? Can it be measured? We can't even get psychologists to agree on a definition for intelligence. You know, there's no standard one definition for intelligence. So tonight we're going to go through many of the different theories on intelligence. And then you take what you learn from these theories and you can make an educated guess on what you believe intelligence is, because not everyone agrees. Even these learned people that have studied for years and years and years don't necessarily agree on the answer to what is intelligence. But every 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade in US schools, children are given an IQ test. Now, if we don't even know a definition for intelligence, what type of test are we giving to these young people? It's got to be measuring something, and that score that you took on these tests that are intelligence tests is on your permanent record card and can go with you for the rest of your life. May get you a job, may not get you a job, may get you into a particular program in a school, may not get you into a particular program based on what your IQ is, your intelligent quotient. Again, we still haven't even defined intelligence yet. I think I just lost you. Are you back?
We're back.
Yay! Yeah, my lights flickered and no storm, and all of a sudden there you were gone. Okay, well, I got you back at least. Yay! Like I said, it never fails when there's a storm. I always get some sort of Zoom issue. Okay, so back to intelligence. So what is IQ? It's a score that you get on an intelligence test, and the meaning of IQ has changed over time. It actually started with Albert Binet and Theodore Simon, and it was started in France. In 1904 was the first recorded intelligence test, but it's not the same type of intelligence test that we take today. Binet and Simon wanted to see what they could do to help young boys who were struggling when they went into school. And I say young boys because in 1904 in France, only boys could go to school. Girls were taught by their mothers at home. Girls did not go to the classroom. So they noticed a pattern that some young men were really struggling. So they made this test so they could see what skills these young men were missing, so they could tutor them and teach them these skills so they would succeed when they go to school. That's not what an IQ test does now, is it? No. An IQ test gives you a score saying your ability to learn. Big difference from your ability to learn to finding out what you needed help in and what needs you may have. The test looked at normal children at each age and then compared people to that norm. So when we talk about the norm or the average, the normal score, that's when we talk about comparing individuals. Now, when the original test was made, that was a good thing because you could look to that other individual and say, okay, they have this skill, this skill, this skill. this person doesn't have this skill, this skill, this skill, and we need to help them learn those skills. Now, individuals are compared to these scores not by what they have as a skill, but by a score that they get on a test that we can't even define what the word intelligence means. So an IQ is formed by looking at a person's mental age, that's the score you get on the test, and their chronological age, their biological age. So there's a standard formula. Now, it's a lot more complicated than the formula I'm going to give you in a second, but this is the formula you would need to know for Intro to Psychology. It's a basic formula that we're going to talk about to find an IQ score. That's the IQ score that they put on your transcripts. So they brought these tests that Binet and Simon made here to the United States, and Stanford University professor Louis Terman developed a different version of this test. Let me close my door again, sorry. So Thurman made the US version of the Stanford Binet, and it was for ages 2 to adult. Now this was a paper and pencil test. So that means 2 to adult. How many 2-year-olds do you know that know how to write and read? So we have a little problem there to begin with. So they had to make multiple versions of this for different ages. And the person who did that was David Wexler. And he took it from beyond a paper and pencil test. Do you remember that paper folding activity I did, at the beginning of this lecture? That's from an actual David Wexler test. And if you would get a psychological test done, that is actually a real question on that exam. For you to fold that piece of paper in your mind and punch those 2 holes up in the right-hand corner. That's a real question. But see, that doesn't take a paper and pencil answer. That's something we can use in our mind. So as we developed the test, we became better at looking at intelligence. Now, how do we calculate IQ? With this formula. The mental age, which is the score you get on the test, divided by your chronological age, how old you are, times 100. So that would be the formula you would want to know for the test. But if you know math, if you take a test and we get older with age, right? We don't get more stupid with age. I mean, the number would get smaller according to what our age is. So there's some statistics, psychological statistics that are done to make sure that it's a little more accurate according to what people who believe this test measures for intelligence. Now, the problem with that paper and pencil test is it really has a lot of variation. An example. So let's say you took the test on a Monday or Friday. You could score 7 to 9 points lower if you took it on a Monday or a Friday versus taking it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. You can score 7 to 9 points lower if you take it before a holiday or right after a holiday. You can score 7 to 9 points lower if you take it right before or right after lunch. We measuring intelligence here, or is there something else possibly going on here to have that big of a difference? And why do I say that's a big difference? Because when we talk about IQ, to get into some school programs, you have to score a certain score on the paper and pencil test before they'll even let you take the David Wexler test. And the score you need to score is 130 points. If you don't get 130 on the paper and pencil test, you don't get the Wexler test. You're not considered intelligent to the point that you would qualify for advanced classes in school. What happens if you took the test on a Monday or a Friday, or a day it was raining, or a day you had a fight with your mom or dad? Your scores are going to be lower. And we see that statistically from looking at exams. But our school systems still use that 130 as a measure to allow people to take that other exam. If a parent wants to pay for it, sure, it's $400 and you can find any psychologist that will give it to you. But the school system doesn't have the resources to have every child tested via the Wexler test because it takes about 2.5 days. Whereas that paper and pencil test takes 3 hours. It's machine scored. You have your results back in 3 weeks. That's good enough, right? But there are a lot of children that are underserved because the test itself has some bias in the extent it's very reliable. Remember those two words, reliability and validity. It's very reliable. It will give you consistent scores. But is it valid? Does it really measure intelligence, or does it measure a type of intelligence? So many people may have their careers directed a different way because of a score that's supposed to measure all types of intelligence, but actually only measures 3 out of the many types of intelligence. So, when we look at intelligence, we need to look at all these different types of intelligence. Now, I'm sure all of you at this point in your college career have heard of the bell-shaped curve, the normal curve. And this is the normal curve. And this is the image, if you want, that you would want to remember for IQ. Right here in the middle, we have 100. So 100 is the mean. Another word for the mean is average. Okay. If you look from that mean, 15 points up or 15 points down, okay, we're talking about this is the average. This yellow section is the average. And we can see that 68% of the population fall in that average range of an IQ of 85 to 115. One standard deviation, that's 15 points on an IQ test, that's these purple sections. One standard deviation up or down, this would be high average, this would be borderline. So in this area, it would say that you're slightly above average. And this one would say you're slightly below average. 2 standard deviations up. Okay, here's the score. See the 130? At 130, you're considered gifted. At 150, you can actually join a group called Mensa, where you have to have a documented IQ score of 150 to even join. I don't know if any of you ever read the Parade magazine in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. There's a column, it's called Ask Maryland. And people ask her questions trying to stump her, because Ask Maryland's IQ is 190. So she's all the way out here. So you're not going to stump her unless you have an IQ comparable of hers. The opposite end of this IQ spectrum here that we have, we start to see limitations. So below 70, you would have people who would need a lot of help. They could maybe with a lot of help do some small task. Once we get towards the lower end, they would even have trouble controlling their bodily functions and may actually be in a coma, unable to speak or do anything. So this is the IQ normal curve. So we said the mean is the average, the standard deviation is 15, that's points from the mean. The population or the people that took the test, and the norming group would be the people who originally took the test that all the tests are compared with. So an example, again, I'll give you my example here. When I'd been teaching for years, but they made a test called the Praxis here in Pennsylvania that all teachers would have to take in order to get their teaching license. And I had been teaching for years at that point, but they had people take this test that were teaching, and we were the norming group. Every teacher who took that test the first time, we were the norming group. And everyone who took the test after us was compared to our scores. We didn't get a score, we got a raw score. So if I wanted to get a job at a different place, I would actually have to take the test again to be compared to the scores that the original teachers took, including myself. Okay? Anytime you're the norming group, your answers and your solutions to whatever they gave you, you become the norm. So if any of you have taken ACTs or SATs 2 times a year as part of the SAT and ACT, they have a section that has about 15 questions. And they tell you right in the test booklet, these will not count toward your score, but try to do your best. Because if you were one of those people that answered those questions, you became the norming group for those questions. And sometime in the future, those questions will become part of an SAT or an ACT, and they're going to compare the results from the people who took that test that you took to everyone else that took it that particular time. Okay? So you were the norming group and didn't even know you were the norming group. Don't you feel special? Let me move back now. Now, Remember these two words. I keep telling you, they show up all the time in this course. So the sooner you learn them, the better off you are. A test must be valid and reliable. Reliability means consistent results. Validity means the test measures what it's supposed to measure. So if the test is both reliable and valid, then we can put some credibility behind it. A standard paper and pencil IQ test is reliable. The disagreement in the psychological community is, again, is it valid? Does it measure intelligence or just one type of intelligence? And for years, we've said it measures all intelligence. And now we're starting to understand it doesn't. So, remember we talked about correlation early, the first lecture. We tend to see high IQ tends to lead to high grades in college and in high school. High IQ leads to good job prestige and a higher salary and marital stability if you have a high IQ. Think about that one. Think, why would that be? Well, what's one of the reasons people fight in a marriage? Money. If you have a high IQ and it says you get a better job and make more money, there's less likely you're going to be fighting about money. But these are correlational research. It's only a small part. It doesn't mean just because you have a high IQ, you're going to be successful in life, because an IQ on that standard test doesn't measure everything, just measures certain things. So let's look at what else could affect IQ. How about motivation? You're here on a Tuesday night on Zoom for like 4.5 hours. I would say you're pretty darn motivated. Your educational background, your culture, your interactions with people, your family, your commitment. These all play a role on how well you achieve what you want to do. Not just one score you got on a piece of paper in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. There are other things involved. So, one intelligence or many? Let's look at the different theories. So you're going to want to know these different theories. Charles Spearman, easiest one to remember. He says there's 2 types of intelligence, general and specific, and he labels them G and S. Yes, just the first letter. Can't possibly forget this one. General and specific. So general would be all types of knowledge, where specific would be, how to change a tire, you know where to put the oil in your car, very specific things. But he says general intelligence is most important. You don't have to know factor analysis. Again, this is another term I put on here for you not to have to read it in your book, because you won't be tested on factor analysis. Lewis Turnstern says it's basically on verbal comprehension and spatial visualization. Verbal comprehension and spatial visualization are 2 of the main components of a David Wechsler test. But that's only 2 types of intelligence. Are there more? Yep. Cattell and Horan says we have crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence, think how a crystal was formed in the earth. Crystallized intelligence is the sum of all the knowledge you've ever learned, whether it's book smart, street smart, from watching social media, from talking to friends. Doesn't matter how you learn the information. Every year, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Crystallized intelligence increases with age. Maybe you could even call it wisdom. Fluid intelligence actually slightly decreases with age. Fluid intelligence is how well you problem solve at a particular time and how fast you can do it. That tends to drop as we get to our 60s. And believe me, I'm now in my 60s. I'm very cognizant of, what I could do before. It may take me a little longer now. It's not that the crystallized intelligence isn't there, but the problem solve, you hand me a geometry word problem, it may take me 2 minutes now to figure it out, where, back when I was in high school, I could do it in 30 seconds. Can I still do it? Sure. It just takes longer. So our fluid intelligence is how well we problem solve right then and now. And then we have emotional intelligence. And the man is Daniel Goleman. And he has had at least 18 books on emotional intelligence on the New York Times bestseller list. He says emotional intelligence is actually more important than IQ. And in business right now, out there in the real world, a lot of businesses agree with him. There are companies that are spending thousands of dollars to do his training program to get their employees' emotional intelligence higher. So what is emotional intelligence? Knowing your emotions, managing your feelings, being self-motivated. Especially think of with the last year with the pandemic, taking classes online, how different it is to motivate yourself to do when you're online versus when you were in a classroom. I had students in my high school class whose first period, in our school, you had to wear shirt and tie and everything. I had students just barely rolling out of bed for first period, hair sticking up, semi-dressed, they weren't motivated because they didn't have to go anywhere other than their bedroom. Right? Self-motivation, recognizing emotions in others. That is really, really key for anybody on here that wants to be a nurse, doctor, in business, any type of industry that you work with people, in your own relationships with others, recognizing emotions in others and being able to label what emotion that person is showing, how to handle relationships. And yes, I'm sorry, guys, women tend to have higher emotional intelligence than men, but men are catching up. And this is why, for years, women were allowed to show emotions and were actually kind of taught to look to people's emotions. Men didn't have that privilege. Men were told to man up, don't cry, It's just a goldfish, even though it was your favorite pet. Whereas a girl, we were taught, okay, you want to make a little funeral service for your goldfish. You want to make a nice box, dig a hole, say a few words over the goldfish, put a little headstone on the goldfish. Guys, flush. And that's what was expected. If you didn't man up, you were looked down upon. That's why women have had more opportunities to practice emotional intelligence. As I said, it's getting better. There was a website, and I think it's still active. It was a psychology website. It's called queendom.com, queendom.com. And it had an emotional intelligence test. It was 106 questions. And it was pretty darn accurate because I used to teach the emotional intelligence class at CCAC, and I would give the actual test, the real emotional intelligence test to my students. And I would have them take the one online. And it was pretty darn close, like within a couple percentage points. And it's free. All you have to do is you have to say if you're male or female, what age group you're in. They show you pictures, and you have to say, what do you think that woman's thinking? Why do you think they're looking at her that way? And it was like all multiple choice. And at the end, when it says, would you like to buy your results? You say no. And it will give you a one-page summary of your emotional intelligence and give you a score that is pretty darn close to the $400 test that a psychologist would give to you. So you may want to see if that site is still active. It was as of last semester. So, but all they do is it's a university site that has collected data. You don't have to put anything personal other than your male, female, and your age there. But you can get a good idea of what your emotional intelligence is. And we are finally at multiple intelligence, since that's what you're going to be working on tonight. Howard Gardner. Gardner is the man in educational psychology. Every single educator knows who Howard Gardner is because he breathed life into the topic of intelligence. Depending on which textbook you're using, so if you're using the new one or if you're using one that's a couple years old, you're going to see that he has 8 or 9 forms of intelligence. It's actually more than that now, but I'll explain why. You only have to know 9. When I went to school and studied psychology, there were only 7. So now there are 9. When you take this multiple intelligence survey that's on Blackboard, be honest, because you're the only one who's going to really benefit from it. If you're honest, it can help you know how to study because you study to your strengths. So if you have a score that's high in linguistic intelligence, that's language, you're a verbal learner. That means you learn best using words. So taking notes, reading the textbook, studying your notes, making note cards, whether they're online note cards or actual paper note cards that you move. You also learn by hearing. So this lecture, seeing the words, a PowerPoint, that's linguistic intelligence. If you score high in spatial intelligence, you are great for organization. So you can organize your materials in a certain way. Typically, people who are high in spatial intelligence will organize their material from what they started with to what they finished. That's traditionally how people organize if they have high spatial intelligence. Musical intelligence. If you score high in musical intelligence, you learn best by music. In other words, if you're studying, you should have music playing in the background, not music with words, just music in the background. It can be classical, it can be guitar, just music in the background will help you encode the information if you have a score that's high in musical intelligence. Logical mathematical. If you score high in logical mathematical, you learn best by making diagrams, like a Venn diagram, mind maps, where you have a key component and then you kind of spider out from that key component. Mind maps for mathematical logical intelligence, that's like a given. That's like gold to you. KWL, what you know, what you want to, what you want to know, what you have learned, organizing your notes in a certain way, making it like a T table. And on the right-hand side of the T, you take your notes. And then at the end of the class, on the left-hand side, you pull out anything that you're not familiar, and then you study only those things because you already know the other stuff. Body kinesthetic. For my body kinesthetic learners on here right now, this 4.5-hour Zoom class is killing you. Seriously. It's the worst thing you could do as a body kinesthetic learner. My body kinesthetic learners learn best by doing. You're on a 4.5-hour Zoom class. You're not doing much other than listening to me. How you can stay focused? Maybe some of you are doodling. Some of you may be doing something else. You might be fidgeting. You might be tapping your feet. You might be chewing on a pencil. You're doing something with your body. Body kinesthetic learners learn best by doing. As I said, this is the worst type of class to take if this is your main strength and nothing else would be high. You're the people that can walk and chew gum at the same time and not miss a beat. Intrapersonal intelligence. You can motivate yourself to do anything. You know yourself. You can motivate others. You can recognize strengths in yourself and in other people. And you learn best by yourself. Studying by yourself. Interpersonal intelligence. If you end up scoring high in interpersonal intelligence, you need a study buddy. You learn best with another person or a group. You learn best with that interaction and discussion. Even if the interaction is with someone who's not taking your class, just being able to say it and explain it to somebody else helps you to learn the material. Naturalistic intelligence. These are our farmers, our outdoor people. My naturalistic intelligence people in this class. First, you learn best during the daylight. As it gets later, like right now, it's starting to get dark. This is not the best time for you to study. the best time for you to study if you have high naturalistic intelligence is while it's light out, daylight, outside. Go for a walk and look over your notes. Sit on the porch and study. Naturalistic intelligence people are good with nature. They also learn best in rooms that have a lot of life, like plants or animals, like a pet. Existential. So this is the newest one that made, so this was the number 9. Existential or the big picture people. These are the hostage negotiators. These are the contractors, the foremen, the people that make the blueprints. These are the fire chiefs and CEOs of companies. They learn best by taking all of the information and processing it together. So if you had high existential intelligence, you would take all of your notes, your book notes, your PowerPoints that you printed out, maybe things that you've taken from what I've said over the Zoom, and you would look at all that information and read it all and synthesize that information into key stuff that you need to learn. Now, I just explained all those different types of intelligence. When you take that multiple intelligence survey, again, be honest, at the very end of the survey is the answer key. So you can go back and see what your strengths are. You may be strong in every single type, or you may have 1 or 2 that are really, really high and a couple that are really low. The awesome thing about Howard Gardner's theory that's different from all the other intelligence theories is Howard Gardner says you can improve every one of these types of intelligence if you work at it. Whereas the standard paper and pencil IQ and the David Wexler IQ test say you're born with your intelligence. And you might learn a little bit from NERC, but not that much. Howard Gardner is the complete opposite. He says we all can learn in each one of these types of intelligence. And when you take this multiple intelligence test, put it aside somewhere and retake it again in 2 years. And you may find that your scores get higher. So Howard Gardner is a big guy in educational psychology. Most teachers know him so well because some school districts require teachers to show in their weekly lesson plans that in every single class, they've addressed all these types of intelligence somewhere during the week. So that kid who may not be good on, reading and may not really be good with spatial things and math, but they're really good body kinesthetic and they're really good in music, they can still shine and feel like they've accomplished something and realize that that's gifted also. Sternberg agrees with Gardner, but he kind of simplified it into 3 types. So he took Gardner's 9 and simplified it into 3: analytic, practical, and creative. Analytical would be the logical, mathematical, verbal, spatial. He lumps all those people together. The creative are body kinesthetic people. These are, the people who are good athletes, or good artists, or singers, or dancers, people who are inventors, things like that. But he includes what we call practical intelligence, common sense. He's the only theorist that included practical intelligence. We're almost done, so hang in there. So I want to give an example because, like I said, the stories will help you remember. I had a young girl in my class when I taught 8th grade, way back when, and she was brilliant. I mean, she had a higher IQ than I did. I think her IQ was like 169 or 170. But she didn't know what to do with herself. She really didn't have good interactions with other students, and she would get anxious and nervous, and she would twirl her hair to the point that it would be in knots. And her mother, who was a CEO of a company, would cut the knots out. So after a while, this poor girl had like bald patches on her head. And she said, I don't know what to do with her. I'm like, what if we put a hat on her so she can't get to her hair? And she's like, oh. And that's what we did. And she stopped twirling her hair. As intelligent as she was and her mother was, they didn't see that simple solution. It was a very practical solution. So prior to this incident, I had not met, and Mary knows I tell this story, and so does the mom. I had a meeting with Mary's mom, and I had never met this woman. And I'm waiting for her to come for observation, and talk. And we were going to go over things I wanted to discuss about Mary, including the twirling the hair. And I see this woman come through the school door dressed to the nines. I mean, the most beautiful suit I had ever seen. These beautiful shoes that probably were like thousands of dollars. Just perfect. And she came in and she had glasses on. And there was this big ball of duct tape on the corner of her glasses, silver duct tape. I'll never forget it. And I'm there thinking, oh my gosh, that's got to be Mary's mom. So I go, hi, nice to meet you. Looks like you damaged your glasses. She goes, yeah, they broke. The screw, came out. And I'm there thinking, this is a woman who's a CEO of a company, and she's walking around with this big blob of duct tape here. And I said, they sell those little kits down at the hardware store. They're like $1 that you can put the little screw in. She's like, oh, really? I said, you know what? This is when I taught on the South Side. I said, let me run down to the hardware store. Here's some scissors so you can take that tape off, and I'll fix your glasses for you. Oh, that's great. So I run down to the hardware store. I get one of those little $1 kits. I'm coming back. Now, I gave her scissors. I thought she's going to cut the tape off. No, she's there trying to unwrap the duct tape. I'm like, here, let me help you. Snip. Oh, that's so much easier. I'm thinking this woman is a CEO of a company. Her IQ is probably close to 180. No common sense. No common sense at all. And, we fixed her glasses and everything. And this was the icing on the cake when she said to me, you know, my glasses have been like that for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks you walked around with a big ball of duct tape and nobody in your company offered to fix your glasses. See, she had high intelligence in everything except practical intelligence. If you've ever met someone who has no common sense, you don't have to admit it now if it's you. But there are some people that just, they're brilliant, but don't have practical intelligence. Okay, so it is a type of intelligence, but you can't measure practical intelligence on an IQ test. So nature versus nurture, that actually came up earlier in the class. Lonnie was asking, you know, where do we get IQ? Part of it's genetic, part of it's environment. You don't have any control over your genes. You know, who your mom and who your dad, you don't have any control over that. But we see that there is a little bit of a slight push from nurture when it comes to intelligence. You get to pick your environment as you get older. Your microenvironment is your family and those people that are immediately in your family. You don't have a choice of your family. I'm sure you've heard that line before. But as you get older, you decide what school you go to. You decide what classes you take. You decide where you're going to work and who you're going to hang out with. You get to decide how your environment can affect you. Reaction range is another one of those terms that you are not required to know for this intro test. It will not be on the test. Okay, so you can skip reading that section in your book. And yes, even though the terms we see here, mental retardation, may not be politically correct, it's actually scientifically correct. When we talk about retardation, retardation means slowing of the mental processing. So mental retardation says that your mental processes are occurring, but occur more slowly. Remember when I did the paper folding thing at the beginning of this class? I said what they were looking for was your processing speed. How fast? People who score an IQ of 70 or below, scientifically, were labeled mentally retarded. Not as a derogatory remark, just claiming that they process information more slowly. That's what it means. 4 to 7 million Americans fall in this category of below 70 on the IQ scale. Most of the time, it's genetic. Down syndrome, trisomy 21. There's an extra X on the 21st chromosome. So trisomy 21. Fragile X syndrome we typically see in men. Women are XX, men are XY. And if there's damage to one of the X chromosomes, and a woman, you have a backup, you got another X. And a man, you got an XY. So if there's damage to your X chromosome, there is no backup. So we tend to see Fragile X syndrome and mental retardation occurring more in men. Can it happen in women? Yes, but typically it's in men. Autism fell under the autism spectrum and umbrella. And this has changed. It's not just a slowing of intelligence, it's different characteristics of intelligence that may give difficulty to some individuals who have autism, especially someone, and this is a good paper topic too, if you haven't come up with anyone. Asperger's. Someone who has Asperger's is very high functioning, but their social skills are not that great. I had a student who had Asperger's who would be very, very uncomfortable with other individuals, literally would get into their space, almost like right to your face. You know, you have that personal space, literally walk up to you to ask a question, but could speak 7 languages fluidly. Remember those peg words? One time, this gentleman, once he learned those peg words, he called my voicemail 144 times to tell me those 20 peg words. I'm not kidding. See, he didn't understand that that's not socially what you do. But he had areas of brilliance, but some areas were, and especially social areas, that were difficult for him. Sometimes there are environmental influences that can cause mental retardation. Did you have a question?
No, I was just thinking how you said how he did the voicemails 144 times.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of a student I had that would have to, when we would, say, okay, we would do the directions for the day, like this is the list, and I'd have it on the whiteboard, and this. He would have to repeat the directions verbally out loud to the point it was just like, so what I would do is the PVC piping, I would connect 2 of them. He would put it in his ear, talking to them, and he could hear himself do the echo mechanism.
Cool. That's a neat idea.
Yeah, so I was like, so we, he named his telephone, and, if it wasn't time for a telephone, I would let him record something on the, on that tablet, like he was leaving his telephone on voicemail.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do telephone, so if, he had to repeat something, yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget it. When I went to get my messages and I'm like, 144 messages. Wow, who the heck is messaging me? And every single one of them was 1 tree, 2 light switch, 3 stole. I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, we had a little talk after that. But he was a super guy, just super guy. He just didn't have that ability, that skill. So some environmental influences for mental retardation, that slowing, would be like fetal alcohol syndrome if mom drank during pregnancy. Childhood diseases like rubella, German measles can cause, problems with development. Exposure to environmental toxins like mercury or lead, or even inadequate prenatal care and medical care for the developing infant. All of these can play a role. And then the other extreme, the 150 to 180, the gifted, we have prodigies. There are children who are 5 years old that can write a symphony. There was a child who was 5 who read the Wall Street Journal daily and could understand it. I mean, some days I can't understand the Wall Street Journal. I mean, that imagine the vocabulary that this 5-year-old would have to have. So we do have prodigies. If a child is gifted, does that mean they're going to be a gifted adult? Not necessarily, because people can choose to use their gifts or not use them. You know, people who may think that they're gifted, that they don't need to study or they don't need to work on anything. Oh, it'll just happen. Whereas someone who knows they may need to study a little harder will study a little harder and may actually succeed more than the person who was labeled gifted.
Also, kids that are labeled gifted a lot of times don't actually even know how to study. So when they do come up against a difficult subject, it's not that they literally don't know how, and then they hit a roadblock.
Yeah, and that in general, even when I was talking about when we did the stuff on memory, that actually all should have been taught in grade school. And some people have never heard half of that stuff I talked about until this class. But teaching children how to learn metacognition is, you know, how to problem solve, how to do that stuff is really important in the school system. And for years, we didn't have it here in the United States. That's why we were falling behind when it came to the world in education because of the way we were teaching. Now that is getting much better than it was. This last year was with Zoom classes and online classes, we took a hit. Everyone took a hit all around the world, but I mean, we took a hit in education. There are a lot of young people that pretty much lost a year because they had to Zoom in and they weren't engaged and they didn't want to be engaged. And I mean, think of it. You're here for 4.5 hours. How hard is it to stay focused for 4.5 hours? And it's even hard for me teaching 4.5 hours to stay focused, let alone some grade school kid. How about like a third grader? You know, just very difficult. And then we have creativity. Creativity's a type of intelligence. You know, the ability to produce something of high quality or change something to solve a problem. And there are two types of creativity. The ability to generate possible solutions. If you've ever brainstormed, you already have met that stage, being able to generate various possible solutions. But even more important, being able to select among them. You know, Steve Jobs, what was it? 2000 is when the first iPod came out. They had enough money to produce one, and they had a couple different designs. To be able to pick which one, think of everything in our society that has changed because of the iPod, which eventually became an iPhone, which eventually other smartphones, iPads, home computers, the internet, Zoom classes. Think of what has changed. All because someone picked the right one 21 years ago. So think of all those people who are inventors. I had a student, and this is our last thing, and then you're done for the night. I had a student who had twins, a little girl and a little boy, and she just would always talk about how she hated diapers because they didn't put enough padding in the right place. So she actually created a diaper for little boys and little girls, and she put a patent on it. and she marketed to, I guess it was Procter and Gamble. And they now have diapers for little boys and little girls where there's different padding. For little boys, more up front. For little girls, more in the middle. She gets, I think she said, 23 cents for every diaper container, for 10 years. She never has to work. 23 cents for every product sold because she had the patent on it. She was sitting in my class at CCAC. You can do anything you can dream. So don't give up on those dreams. So that's the end of the lecture. I told you I would give you time, cognizance of what you have to do. So you can do it now, or you can do it somewhere during the week so you don't fall behind in your activity journal. Because remember, you are now halfway through the course. You got 3 more weeks, that's it. You're going to do the multiple intelligence survey. That's going to go in your activity journal that you'll give me toward the end. I need your paper topics. If you haven't sent me an email telling me your paper topic, you need to do that by Friday. Okay? I haven't turned one down yet. So, if you can give me a valid reason and know there's enough research out there for you to do it, and I see the connection to psychology, I will okay your topic. Next Tuesday, I will lecture the whole time. There'll be no test on Zoom. So no reason for anyone to come in at 4 unless you have questions. Of course, I'll be there for office hours. So we're going to cover human growth and development, and we're going to cover social psychology. At the end of the lecture, I will email the test to everyone and an answer sheet. You won't start the test until whenever you're ready, but you have to have the test completed by that following week. And that answer sheet would need to be, in my email so I can have it checked so I can give you your grade. This will give you a little bit of a break of doing a Zoom test. I'm trusting you to be honest. Little psychological experiment here, see if it works. And it will give you a little time to work on your paper too. So if you can start working on that tonight, at least with a topic. Papers due in 2 weeks. 3 weeks is the final exam. So it's not far away. Remember, you will be doing a presentation. You can do it live. That last class. It's like 3 to 4 minutes long. Or I will send a Flipgrid link out just for this, like you did your introductions. You can also choose to do it there. That presentation is part of your paper grade. So you either have to do it live in front of me and any classmates that want to listen to it, or on Flipgrid. So you get the points towards your paper. Any questions?
If we choose to do it like in front of you after class, or can we set something up where it would just be private,
Yeah, you can
one-on-one?
set it up during one of my Zoom times that I have, office hours.
Okay.
Yeah. When we get closer to that week, since that's the last week, I'll post Zoom hours. It'll be,
Okay.
I have my normal ones, but we can also do it, if it's not on a Tuesday, we could set up a couple other dates. But yes,
Right.
you could do the Flipgrid, you could do it for me, you can do it in front of the class. And then the final, of course, will be taken that night online on Zoom.
Perfect.
And that's it. Anything else, anybody? Enjoy
Final one.
your surveys.
I had a question about the research paper.
Okay.
So there's not like a syllabus or anything that I can see. And like, it's not a research paper as in like, we're not conducting any type of like experiment ourselves. This is more of like an English paper kind of research paper where we're researching other people's work and just giving our opinion with that data.
No, well, you're researching their work
Okay.
and giving their results and their data.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Your opinion doesn't necessarily need to be part of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
5 pages, 5 full pages.
All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one about the paper as well.
Okay.
I see that citation of sources is required. What format would you like?
MLA or APA, your choice. If you're going to be taking lots of psych classes, do APA because that's what you're going to do on every other course. If this is the only psych class you're ever going to take and you already know how to do MLA, that's fine. Just don't mix them. If you do APA, remember you would also have to put an abstract. That means you'd have to have an extra page with a little 1-paragraph summary. But you can do either one, APA or MLA, just as long as you don't give me half a paper in APA and half a paper in MLA.
Your final, can you go over that?
Final exam is multiple choice. It'll be on motivation and emotions, personality and stress.
Is that in the syllabus, what those subjects are going to be on, or is that not?
Yeah, it's they're already posted. Also, those lectures are already posted on Blackboard even.
Ma'am, what did you say to do about the survey?
You have to take the survey. So you have to actually take the survey and the results that you come up with, whatever your results are, that's what you're going to put in your activity journal. So you'll say, you know, the multiple intelligence survey, and you're going to just list your results. That's all you have to do is list your results. So you just take the survey, add up the points. It tells you how to score it, and then find out, you know, what your multiple intelligence strengths and areas that you need to improve. And then that gives you some opportunity to know if you're studying to your strengths. I mean, if you study, let's say, by using like note cards, but your strengths are your naturalistic intelligence, well, maybe you could take those note cards that you study and study outside. Then you increase the likelihood of more success. So that's the goal of the survey, is to help you learn what your particular strengths are, and then use that material that you figure out to help you to learn more. So it's kind of an application to not only this class, but any class you would ever take. It can help you improve how you learn material. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah. Hello.
Okay.
I don't think she hears me.
I heard you, Lorenzo.
Oh, okay. The survey. You have, I'm looking at the course documents right now. And where is that located at? The actual exercise that we got to do?
I think it's on there, but I can, once I get off of Zoom, I'll be glad to look again, or you can send me an email and I'll just attach it.
It's under multiple intelligence survey, write results in your journal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Journal, okay, this is, wow.
Yeah,
It's a
if you're
class.
having trouble finding it, if you command F, you can just search intelligence and it should show up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, the cat's back. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, well, have a good night, everyone. Use your time wisely. Like I said, you got 45 minutes. The survey maybe takes 10 minutes. It tops.
This has to be done now? Oh, shit. Oh, fuck.
Language. Okay, well, have a good night, everyone.
Okay,